Close your eyes for a second. You're lying on a stone bench. The bench is cold. There's a thin wool blanket under you that smells like sweat and old smoke and something else you can't quite place. The room you're in is small, maybe 10 paces by 10 paces, and there are no windows, just a single oil lamp burning in the corner, throwing long yellow shadows up the walls. Somewhere above you, you can hear a sound. It's faint at first, a low rolling rumble, like distant thunder. But it doesn't stop. It just keeps going, on, rising and falling in waves. It takes you a second to realize what it actually is. It's people, tens of thousands of them, sitting in stone seats directly above your head, eating bread, shouting, laughing, placing bets. And every few minutes, the rumble gets louder, swells into a single deafening roar, and then quiets back down again. You know exactly what that roar means. Someone in another cell, in another tunnel, just walked through a gate. Someone else just didn't. A man in a leather apron pushes open the wooden door of your cell. He doesn't speak. He sets a wooden bowl on the floor next to you. Inside the bowl is a thick beige porridge, barley, beans, a little pork fat. It's the same meal you've eaten every single day for the last 2 years. It's the same meal everyone in your line of work eats, because it puts on weight fast and keeps the weight on. You eat it without tasting it. When you finish, 2 more men come in. They strap a wide leather belt around your waist. They fit a bronze guard over your right arm. They tie a metal greave to your left shin. They lift a tall rectangular shield, the kind painted with the colors of your school. They don't hand you a sword. The swords come later. One of them looks at you and says, quietly, in Latin, vale. It means be well. You stand up. You walk down a long stone corridor lit by lamps every few paces. You pass other men in other cells, some praying, some pacing, some sitting completely still and staring at the wall. None of them look at each other. There's an unspoken rule about that. You don't look. You don't speak. You don't ask names. You reach the gate. It's made of iron bars, taller than you are. On the other side of it, there is a long, dark tunnel. And at the end of the tunnel, there is a square of blinding white sunlight. And inside that square of sunlight, there is the loudest sound you have ever heard in your life. A man in a red tunic hands you a short sword. It's heavier than you expect. The gate begins to rise. And here is the only question that actually matters. Did you know you were about to die? This is the question almost nobody has ever properly answered about gladiators. Let's start with the most basic thing. When you imagine a gladiator in your head, you probably picture a slave, dragged in chains across the Mediterranean, forced into the arena against his will. And that picture is partly true. By the time the games reached their peak, something strange had happened to the profession. Free men, Roman citizens, were signing up to become gladiators on purpose. They were signing oaths that legally turned them into property. A successful gladiator could earn more in a single afternoon than a Roman soldier earned in a year. Famous ones had fan clubs. Children scratched their names into walls. Women left them gifts. Poets wrote about them. Some of them eventually bought their own freedom and retired wealthy. A few of them even became trainers themselves and lived to old age. So already, the picture is more complicated than you thought. If even free men were signing up willingly, what exactly did they think they were signing up for? To answer that, you need to understand the training schools. They were called ludi. Every major city in the empire had at least one, and Rome itself had 4. They were enormous compounds, half military barracks, half athletic academy, surrounded by high walls and run with the kind of discipline you'd expect from an army camp. When the new recruit arrived, whether he was a slave brought in by force or a volunteer who'd signed his name to a contract, the first thing that happened was an evaluation. The trainers studied his body, his reach, his balance, his reflexes, and based on what they saw, they assigned him a fighting style. Some men became murmillones, heavy fighters with big shields and short swords. Some became retiarii, light and fast, armed with a trident and a net. Some became thrakes, with a small shield and a curved blade. There were dozens of these styles, each designed to look dramatic in the arena, each designed to create matchups that an audience would pay to see. And once a man was assigned his style, He trained. For months, sometimes for years, 6 days a week. Wooden weapons twice the weight of the real ones, so the real ones would feel light when the moment came. The trainers, by the way, were almost always retired gladiators themselves, men who had survived the arena and lived to see gray hair. So every new recruit was learning from someone who had walked through the gate dozens of times and walked back out again. Which means every recruit, on his very first day, already knew the math. He knew most fighters survived their first match. He knew most survived their second. He knew that the longer you fought, the better you got, but also the more times the dice got rolled. He knew the names of the men who'd won 100 fights and still didn't walk out of the arena alive. He knew the numbers. So when he stepped through the gate for the first time, he wasn't stepping into a mystery. He was stepping into something he had been studying every single day for years. Now think about that morning ritual again. The night before a fight, every gladiator scheduled to appear was brought to a public banquet. It was called the Cena Libera, the free dinner, and it was open to the public. Roman citizens could come and watch the fighters eat. They could see who looked nervous, who looked relaxed, who was eating with appetite, and who couldn't keep anything down. Some of the men used this dinner to write final letters, to divide up their possessions, to send messages to family. A few of them, according to ancient writers, sat in stunned silence and barely touched the food. Others did the opposite. They ate enormous meals, they laughed loudly, they drank like nothing was happening tomorrow. What does that tell you? It tells you they knew exactly what tomorrow was. You don't write a final letter if you think you're coming back for certain. You don't divide up your possessions if you believe the next 24 hours are guaranteed. The gladiators at that dinner were doing something every soldier in history has done the night before a battle, preparing, quietly, for the possibility that they would not be there to eat dinner the next day. So yes, they knew. But here's where it gets stranger. In the morning, before the games began, every gladiator scheduled to fight took part in a procession into the arena. They walked in a line, in full armor, in front of the entire crowd. They walked past the seats of the wealthy. They walked past the emperor's box, if the emperor was there. And as they passed the emperor, tradition says they raised their swords and shouted a single phrase. Morituri te salutant. Those who are about to die salute you. Now, historians argue about how often this actually happened. Some say it was rare. Some say it was a single famous incident that got remembered as if it were tradition. But the phrase itself survived for 2,000 years for a reason. It survived because it captured something true. These men knew the word Morituri. It means the ones who are about to die. They were saying it about themselves, out loud, in front of thousands of people, as they walked toward the gate. And then they walked through it anyway. Did gladiators know they were about to die? The answer is yes, and also no. They knew in the abstract that one day they probably wouldn't walk out. They had seen the bodies of their friends. They had watched men they'd trained with for years not come back. They had written letters. They had signed oaths. They had said the word Morituri out loud in front of the emperor. But on any given afternoon, walking toward any given gate, they also didn't know. Not for certain. Not yet. There was always a chance the crowd would spare them. There was always a chance their opponent would slip. There was always a chance today wasn't the day. And that's the thing that makes it almost unbearable to think about now. Because they didn't walk into the arena hoping to die. They walked in hoping to win one more time. Hoping to hear the crowd roar for them. Hoping to walk back through the gate, back down the corridor, back to the cell, with the cold stone bench and the wool blanket and the bowl of porridge. Hoping, more than anything, to do it all again tomorrow. And the strangest, hardest, most human truth about them is this. Even when they knew the math, even when they had said the words, even when they had written the last letters and divided up the last possessions, they walked through the gate anyway, because some part of every single one of them believed, all the way until the very last second, that this might not be the day. If you watched this far, the channel's already for you. Subscribe. I publish these every week.